Federal Fag, and Alex Reynolds Mystery, Series Book 2. Author Fred Hunter, publisher St. Martin's Press, New York, 1998. Narrator Eric Ost. For Raymond Dragon. Chapter 9. To say I was surprised to see him would seriously understate the case. I knew his presence signified that something was seriously wrong. Nelson never just happened to be in the neighborhood, and I couldn't believe that he'd flown in all the way from D.C. to L.A. for the express purpose of rescuing us from the hands of the police, let alone the fact that there hadn't been enough time. It had been less than 2 hours since Brett Lover was shot, and Nelson's love for us wouldn't take him from Washington to Arlington, not to mention Los Angeles. He'd never shown any great fondness for us. Then again, he rarely showed any emotion at all. The feelings were decidedly mutual. I refer to him by surname only, something that I'm usually too polite to do, because although he's my boss on the occasions that we work for the government, I don't like him. But then, how many people like their bosses? Nelson wordlessly led us from Nazi headquarters, as I'd affectionately come to think of it, to his car. Once outside, I asked him how he'd known where we were. I called your hotel when I arrived in town. Your roommate told me what had happened. My husband, I said flatly, irritated with his insistence on calling Peter my roommate, even though he knew better. Whatever. Nelson climbed into the car and Mother got in front beside him. I took the back, which would have made conversation a little disconcerting had he chosen to talk at all. But he informed us at the outset that he wanted to wait to talk until he had the three of us together. So he started the car and headed for our hotel. I was left to contemplate the back of his perfectly shaped head. I would rather have looked inside of it. I once described Nelson as swarthy, and I'll stick by that description. He has dark hair, dark skin, and eyes so dark brown, and they are almost black. It irritates me that he's so handsome. Every time I've seen him, he's been wearing the requisite government-issue navy blue suit and exhibiting the demeanor to go with it. You'd have thought he had a pole up his ass if he were able to get it open far enough to admit one. My, this is nice, said Nelson, looking around as he walked into our hotel room. Nothing like my room at the Beaumont. The government isn't paying for this. The government hasn't been asked to, said Peter sharply. Then he turned to me and said, God, I'm sorry I lost you. I couldn't find anybody I recognized by the time I got back. You were gone. I shook my head with resignation. It was a madhouse. Whoever shot Lover was probably halfway off the pier before we even knew what had happened. Laura, I need some tea, said Mother. I feel I've been through the ringer. I'll call room service, said Peter. I noticed for the first time since the shooting that Mother really did look a little pale. It then occurred to me that though she'd been an integral part of our government doings, this was the first time she'd been present when someone was killed. For me, it was getting to be old hat. Are you all right? I asked. Oh, yes, she said, waving me off as she dropped into the chair by the little circular table. I just thought we were going to end up in the Ooskow before Larry showed up. We were all for it up until then. Now I knew she was upset. Whenever she started dropping her H's, it was a sure sign that she was more distressed than she'd let on. Peter was just hanging up the phone when I asked Nelson, what exactly did bring you to our aid? I wasn't coming to your aid, he said perfunctorily as he dropped his briefcase on the bed. I didn't even know you'd been experiencing difficulties until I arrived. That was the essential difference between Agent Lawrence Nelson and most of the rest of the human race. He saw our present situation as a difficulty. I saw it as a crisis. You knew that my friend had been killed. Mother told you that much on the phone. Well, yes, he said with a little shrug. But while the death of anyone may be regrettable, my dander flew up at the way he emphasized the word may. It's not usually of any particular consequence. I mean, to the general workings of the government. Then why did you come out here? Peter asked. Nelson exuded professional distance as if he were emanating armor. He was like a human extension of the Martian ships in the War of the Worlds. I came here to tell you that it's time for you to go back to Chicago. That is probably the only thing he could have said that would have gotten Mother back to her feet. She rose slowly, her eyes riveted on Nelson. He hadn't exactly lost the interest of Peter and me either. I couldn't believe what I just heard. "What?" said Mother. "I'm sure you understood what I just said." "I understood the words, yes," said Mother, "but I can't think what you mean by them." "I mean exactly what I said. It's time for you to return to Chicago." This is one of the aspects of Nelson's personality that I've never been able to get used to. His propensity for delivering information like this as if it required no further explanation. He mets out details like individual seeds of grain to the starving third world masses, and it's always been obvious that he considers us to be very low on the food chain. "Why?" I said. "Do you have a job for us?" "No." "Then why on earth should we leave here?" Mother was beginning to sound absolutely indignant. "Oh, wait a minute," said Peter. "You came all the way out here to tell us that. Couldn't you just use the phone?" "No," he said simply. "It was important that I come here." "Well, as much as I appreciate your smoothing over our trouble with the police, I must say you have a hell of a nerve," Mother said hotly. "You expect us to go home simply because you come in here and say we should, with no reason whatsoever. I'm afraid we'll have to disappoint you on that. We can't leave now. We have a lot to do." "I want you to leave this alone." "My friend has been killed," I said. "I'm sure the police will take care of that." "No, they won't. Their view of Patrick is no better than—" I had started to say no better than yours, but there's a confrontation and there's confrontation. I wasn't prepared to cross the line with Nelson, at least until we knew why he was really here. I settled for a more minor attack. "I can't explain it to somebody like you, but I have every reason to believe that they'll just write it off." "A good policeman will only write off a murder if he's sure he can't solve it. Whether or not they accomplish that has nothing more to do with you, though you've been of some little assistance to my department." Peter emitted a at that. Nelson shot him a glance and continued. "You can't believe that you would be any more capable of solving a murder than the professionals." Peter started to say something, but Mother laid a hand on his arm to stop him. "So far," she said, "I haven't heard anything that you couldn't have told us over the phone. Surely you didn't expect us to react any differently in person." He sighed again. In that way, he had tried to make the three of us feel as if we were being tiresome children. "I suppose I didn't. There's more going on here than just the murder of two young men, isn't there?" I said. There was a long pause, during which Nelson looked at the floor. He seemed to be debating with himself. He finally raised his head and said, "Your being here may have seriously jeopardized an ongoing investigation." "An investigation? Since when does the CIA look into domestic matters?" said Mother. Peter added, "I thought your local duties were cut back due to Watergate." Nelson ignored Peter and responded to Mother, sounding exactly as if he were a tour guide at the UN. "Our precise activities may seem a bit murky to the public in general. Our activities encompass many different things and may on occasion require involvement in domestic issues." "Oh my God," I said, sinking onto the bed and putting my face in my hands. It was Mother's call, wasn't it? When she asked you about Mono Man Productions. Nelson didn't even bother looking at me. He simply continued to face Mother as if I wasn't speaking. "And that's what brought you out here. It's organized crime, isn't it? You're investigating organized crime and the porn industry." Nelson turned to me without changing expression. "My department would not be conducting such an investigation." "Then why are we even having this conversation?" said Peter angrily. Peter has far less use for Nelson than I do. "Surely you didn't come out here just to spring us from jail," said Mother. 40s movie lingo sounded a lot funnier with an English accent. "And surely you didn't come all the way out here just to warn us off. What's going on, Larry?" "That's exactly what I came here to do," said Nelson, sounding ruffled for the first time. "Warn you off. You've blundered into something important and we need for you to get out of it." "What? What have we blundered into?" I said. He glanced down at his briefcase as if there were something in it he would sorely like to use on us. Like a blackjack. Or a gun. A muscle twitched on his right jaw, and I realized that this was the first time I'd ever seen him struggle with himself. It was clear to me that he was aggravated at our insistence on more details, and at the same time understood that he couldn't expect us to pack up and leave just because he said so. I'll bet he wished it could be that easy. Gene, you know we only discuss facts that are pertinent to cases on which you're working, and at that, we only tell you facts that are absolutely essential to your participation. Would you please stop talking like a training manual? Said Mother. He went on unperturbed. What is going on here is something in which you're not involved, and as such you know I can't tell you anything about it. The only thing I can tell you is that now your continued presence here may cause more trouble. I have to admit that at that point, if he'd said, please, I might have been inclined to consider leaving. I wouldn't have gone, but I would have felt a lot guiltier about staying. However, I don't think Nelson would say please if you bit his balls. Before Mother could reply, I drew myself up and said, Sorry, Nelson. It's not enough. Patrick was a friend of mine, and we intend to find out who killed him. Yeah, said Peter, seconding me. And if Patrick's death wasn't enough, then seeing Brett Lover killed right in front of us this morning tore it. We're staying. Mother was silent, but she raised her eyebrows in a way that was as much as to say, So there. You know, Nelson said at last, I could have just left you at the jail. Then why didn't you? I said. The look on his face told me that he realized his outburst, albeit a quiet one, had been an indiscretion, and after watching him for a moment, a more drastic realization hit me. You didn't want us in there, did you? You didn't want us to talk to them. Nelson paused dramatically for a moment before reaching down for his briefcase and saying, Very well. I said what I came to say. He checked the latch of the briefcase as if he suspected it might have been tampered with. While we talked, I tried not to take offense, but the help I gave you this afternoon is the last I can offer. If you're going to stay here against the wishes of the government, then I won't be able to bail you out again. He said that as if he were in the habit of bailing us out, which is probably precisely how he meant it to sound. It made me furious. By the way, said Mother, what did you tell the detectives to get them to let us go so quickly? Nelson started for the door, and without looking back, he said, I told them you were working for the CIA. Wait a minute, Nelson, I said as firmly that he stopped and turned around. Why did you set my mother up in that building? Why did you want her to watch the place? He smiled coyly. I didn't want her to watch the place. I wanted her to watch him. Why? I demanded. Nelson sighed. Go back to Chicago, Alex. With this, he left the room, closing the door behind him. The door swung open and a Fig Newton exited, I said. What in the hell does that mean? Said Peter. I was paraphrasing Groucho Marx. I mean, Nelson, you twit. Why did he want Patrick watched? I don't know. Him and his goddamn secrecy. I turned to Mother and said, He's doing it to us again. If only he told you what the hell he wanted you to keep your eyes open about, we wouldn't be in this mess. All he said was he wanted me to watch for anything unusual, but I can't believe he'd have me sit there and wait for a murder to happen. Don't be too sure, said Peter sardonically, but you said Patrick's murder is the only unusual thing that happened. It was. We thought about this in silence for a minute. Finally, I sighed with exasperation and said, Well, one thing I do know, it looks like we're on our own now. We won't have the full force of the U.S. government behind us. I know, I feel safer already, said Peter. Nelson did make one serious mistake, and I'll bet he's regretted it now, I said. What's that? Mother asked. He told the police we're working with the CIA, and as much as he may want us out of the picture, there's no way for him to take us back now. Maybe that means the police will stay out of our hair, said Peter. I never thought I'd say the day when there'd be trouble and we'd actually want the police to stay away, said Mother. Well, we have two leads, I said. Derek Holmes, the producer-director, and this Sid Wishes person who seems to have been a friend of Patrick's. At least we know he visited him. I'd much rather try the actor than the director, said Peter. So would I, but that leaves us with another problem. Sid Wishes can't be his real name, and without it we can't hope to locate him. Said Mother thoughtfully. Makes you wish we still had the full weight of the U.S. government behind us. What about Jeff Durkin? Said Peter. What about him? Well, maybe he knows Wishes' real name. I thought about this, then shook my head. I don't know. I'd rather not bring him into it if we can avoid it. Why not? Said Mother. He seems harmless enough. Well, that's just it. Brett Lover seemed harmless enough, and he ended up dead. I wouldn't want that to happen again. Mother made a little tisk sound and shook her head. I hadn't thought of that. You're probably right. Then it struck me like a lump of hot lead dropping into my stomach. Oh my God! What is it? Said Mother, looking at me with deep concern. I just realized why Patrick was killed. Why? Said Peter. I looked at him. My eyes were tearing up, and I fought to keep back the impending flood, but it was hard because I really did see the truth at last. Because of me, I said. There was a stunned silence during which both Peter and Mother looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. And I wish I had, because it would have made accepting what I'd just realized a lot easier to take. What nonsense, said Mother, but her expression had changed from concern to confusion. It's true, I said. Think about what Nelson said. We jeopardized an investigation. If they really are investigating the mob, then it's my fault that Patrick was murdered. How do you figure that? Said Peter, obviously distressed, but trying to sound as unconcerned as possible. Because of my fucking big mouth, I said loudly. I told him I was with the CIA because I was trying to make myself sound important. And what did he do? He talked about it while they were filming, and now both Patrick and the man he told about it are dead. Mother and Peter stared at me, much as they would have liked to. They couldn't deny the logic of this. There was a dead quiet between us for a minute, and despite what I now believed, I really did wish they could say something to convince me otherwise. Finally, Mother said, We don't know that for a fact, darling, and if we did know it, it was a mistake. A mistake? She waved me off. And you couldn't possibly have expected this outcome, so there's no sense beating yourself until we know. Come to think of it, there wouldn't be much point in it even if we knew you were right. But you know, said Peter, if what you think is true, then that makes Derek Holmes the obvious suspect. Jeff Durkin told us Holmes is Mano Man Productions. If Nelson and his crew are investigating Holmes, then... His voice trailed off as he realized where that train of thought was leading. He was too kind to finish it. You see, I said, I'm responsible. All right now, said Mother sternly. She really has absolutely no time for self-pity or recrimination, no matter how warranted they might be. Enough of that. We have to decide what to do now. Further conversation was interrupted by the arrival of room service with our tea, which we automatically took out to the balcony. Preparations gave us time to think, and Mother relaxed the moment the hot cup was in her hands. We sat in prolonged silence, drinking our tea and mulling over how to proceed. For my part, I was too caught up in my newfound guilt to think clearly. Mother sighed and slipped her saucer back into the cup. Well, she said at last, there is one other person who might know Sid Weinstein's name, and he has no connection with that video company. Who? Said Peter. Mr. Watkins, my neighbor. He seems to know Wishes by sight. Maybe he knows what his real name is. It's worth a try, I said. One thing's for sure, now that we know Nelson wanted Patrick watched, we need more than ever to find somebody who knew what Patrick was up to. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy
to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.